It's Wednesday, February 11th, 2026. And if you've been tracking the diplomatic cables or, just scrolling through the news, you know there's really only one room where it's all happening today.
The Oval Office. Or maybe Mar-a-Lago, depending on the schedule.
Right. We're talking about a summit that feels like it's been years in the making, even though it's happening right now. President Donald Trump is sitting down with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
And while you're going to see the handshakes, the photo ops, what they're discussing behind closed doors is, well, it's incredibly heavy.
It's existential. I don't think that's an exaggeration.
Not at all.
So for this deep dive, we're basing our analysis on a pretty specific piece of coverage. It's a segment from Fox and Friends First.
And they brought in an analyst to break it all down, Robert Greenway.
Robert Greenway from the Heritage Foundation. And the headline they're running with, it's not about trade, it's not about cultural ties, it's Iran, nuclear talks, and regional threats.
Just two phrases that usually signal things in the Middle East are about to get very, very tense.
So that's really our mission today. We're not just looking at the fact that these two leaders are meeting. We want to unpack why now in February 2026 and what it really means when an analyst like Greenway is the one framing the entire conversation.
Because when you put Trump, Netanyahu, and the words nuclear talks in the same sentence, the stakes just go through the roof.
Absolutely. And you have to look at the timing. February 2026.
Right. We're well into the administration at this point. This isn't some getting to know you chat.
No, this is a strategy session.
Yep.
So let's start with the players. Trump and Netanyahu, they have a history that is, well, let's call it complex.
That is a very polite way of putting it. I mean, they've had incredible highs, right? The Abraham Accords, the embassy move.
Yet also real friction.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But what brings them together here, and this is what the source material points to, is a shared perception of a threat.
The old enemy of my enemy is my friend idea.
It's more like the person who sees the same threat map I do is the person I need in the room. And look, seeing Robert Greenway's name attached to this is a huge tell.
Okay, so for anyone who doesn't follow the think tank world, what does that mean? The Heritage Foundation.
Heritage isn't just offering neutral commentary. They are, in many ways, the architects of a very specific, a very muscular foreign policy.
So they're not the people you bring on TV if you're advocating for, a softer approach with Tehran.
Exactly. Greenway comes from the maximum pressure school of thought. So if Fox and Friends First is using his analysis to frame this meeting, it tells you the conversation in that room is not about appeasement.
It's about leverage. It's about squeezing.
Exactly.
Which brings us right to that first huge pillar of the meeting, Iran nuclear talks. Now, I want to push back on this a little because we've been hearing about Iran nuclear talks for, 2 decades now?
At least.
So why is this meeting right now in 2026 any different? Why should you care today?
Because the clock has basically run out.
Yeah.
That's the subtext to all of this.
Yeah.
Back in 2015 or even 2020, we talked about breakout time, how long it would take Iran to get enough fissile material.
Right, that was the whole metric.
In 2026, that theoretical timeline it's functionally zero.
So when the headline says nuclear talks, it doesn't mean let's sit around a table in Vienna.
No. And that's the crucial point that someone like Greenway would make. When Trump and Netanyahu are discussing nuclear talks in this context, they're likely discussing the failure of previous talks.
They're discussing what happens when the talking stops.
Precisely. Are we talking about a return to crippling sanctions? A credible military threat? Or, is there some grand bargain that only a deal maker like Trump believes he can pull off?
It's like the art of the deal, but with enriched uranium.
With the highest stakes imaginable. And you have to remember, Netanyahu has always seen the Iranian nuclear program as the absolute red line. He is not flying to the U.S. in February 2026 to talk about containing the problem.
He's there to talk about preventing it.
Yes, full stop.
And that's where the dynamic between these two gets so interesting. You have Trump, who famously wants to avoid new wars, bring troops home, that whole America First focus. And then you have Netanyahu, who is looking at a threat he believes might require immediate, maybe even kinetic action. How do you square those two worldviews?
That is the billion-dollar question. And it's why that second part of the headline is so critical. Regional threats.
You can't separate the nuke from the neighborhood?
You can't. Let's dig into that. Regional threats. It sounds so generic,
Like any other business on a meeting agenda?
Right. But when Greenway and the Fox team use that phrase, they are talking about something very specific. They're talking about Iran's proxy network, the so-called Ring of Fire. they've built around Israel and American interests.
So we're talking about Hezbollah in Lebanon.
And the Houthis in Yemen, the militias in Iraq and Syria. See, the old way of thinking maybe from a few years back was that you could treat these as separate problems.
You handle the nuclear file in one room, the terrorism file in another.
But the heritage perspective, and very likely Netanyahu's perspective, is that it is all one organism.
Octopus.
The octopus. Iran is the head, the proxies are the tentacles. And the argument is you can't fight the tentacles while you're still feeding the head.
So if I'm understanding the strategy they're analyzing, you can't have a successful nuclear talk if Iran still feels it can use its proxies to cause chaos across the region.
That's it, exactly. And think about it from the American side. Regional threats isn't just a problem for Israel. It's a threat to shipping lanes in the Red Sea.
It's threats to U.S. bases in the area.
It's a drone hitting a Saudi oil refinery and your gas prices spiking overnight.
Ah, so that's the America First angle? It's not just about protecting an ally, it's about global market stability.
Correct. And that's the bridge between Trump's worldview and Netanyahu's. Trump cares about stability, energy, and strength. Netanyahu cares about survival. The overlap in that Venn diagram is stop Iran from causing chaos.
But here's the friction I see. If the regional threats are getting worse, and the headline implies they are, doesn't that make a nuclear deal harder to achieve? I mean, if you're Iran and you feel cornered, don't you just sprint for the bomb even faster?
And that is the classic security dilemma. That is absolutely the tension in that room. Netanyahu would probably argue that the credible threat of force is the only thing that can stop that sprint.
And Trump might argue there's another way. A leverage point.
Maybe an economic one or a diplomatic one that gets the result but avoids a war. And Greenway's role on a show like Fox and Friends First is to analyze which way that wind is blowing.
And based on his background, he'd likely be arguing for what?
Strength. The argument from that sphere is almost always that strength is the only language adversaries truly understand. He's likely arguing that the U.S. needs to fully and visibly back Israel's posture to force Iran to back down.
So it's less about diplomatic engagement and more about shock and awe through sanctions or credible threats.
Or just restoring deterrence. The argument would be that the regional threats are so high because deterrence is eroded. To fix the problem, you have to reestablish it. And you do that by having the American president and the Israeli prime minister stand shoulder to shoulder and basically say, the game has changed.
The optics of the meeting become the message itself.
100%. The fact that this is breaking news, that they're clearing the decks for this summit, that tells Tehran one thing. We are coordinating.
You know, I want to go back to that Heritage Foundation lens for a second. We talk about media literacy a lot. When a listener sees a source like this, Fox News, breaking news, a heritage expert, what should they immediately understand about the narrative being built?
They should understand that this is a narrative built around American hard power.
Yeah.
You're not going to hear an analysis focused on the humanitarian nuances of sanctions relief.
No.
You're going to hear about national security interests, protecting the homeland, and backing key allies against a common adversary. It's a hawkish perspective.
And a perspective that in February 2026 probably carries a lot of weight in certain circles.
It does. It suggests the administration is looking to tighten the screws, not loosen them.
Let's play devil's advocate. Is there any scenario where this meeting isn't about pressure or a potential conflict? Could there be like a Nixon to China moment here?
With Trump, you can never, ever rule out the surprise pivot. He loves being the guy who makes the deal no one else saw coming. But, and this is a huge but, Netanyahu is the counterweight to that impulse. His entire political career, his legacy, is built on the premise that the Iranian regime cannot be trusted, that it is ideologically committed to Israel's destruction.
So even if Trump wanted to cut some grand bargain, Netanyahu is the voice in his ear saying, don't fall for it.
Or at the very least, if you cut that deal, the enforcement has to be so airtight that they can't breathe without us knowing about it. Which, of course, brings us right back to regional threats.
Right, because a nuclear deal that ignores the proxies
is a deal that Netanyahu likely sees as worthless. Because even if they don't have a nuke, they can still besiege you with an army of militias.
A non-nuclear Iran that still controls 4 Arab capitals is still a mortal threat.
In Israel's eyes, yes, absolutely.
And let's connect this back to the date, February 11th, 2026. Politically, you're past the honeymoon period of a presidency. You have to start delivering results.
And results in foreign policy are. They're tricky. Often, no news is good news. But we have news. The headline is nuclear talks. That means the status quo isn't working anymore.
That's actually a pretty chilling thought, that silence is only broken when things are getting dangerous.
Well, think about the alternative. If they weren't meeting and Iran was getting closer to a weapon and its proxies were getting bolder, that's how you sleepwalk into a major conflict.
So by having this meeting, by putting it on the front page, they're trying to seize the narrative.
To say we are on top of this, we are in control, whether they are or not is a different question.
It's all about controlling the narrative to control the outcome.
That's the hope anyway.
As we start to wrap up, what strikes me is how much the source material reveals by what it doesn't say.
How so?
It doesn't say peace talks. It doesn't say economic summit. The entire vocabulary is adversarial. Threats, nuclear.
It sets a very martial tone, doesn't it? It's preparing the public for, at the very least, a high-tension standoff. Yeah.
Do you think that's intentional? Is the coverage and the choice of experts meant to prepare us for something?
I think it's reflecting the reality of the situation. I mean, you can't really sugarcoat a centrifuge spinning at 90% enrichment. You can't put a happy face on a proxy army firing ballistic missiles. The language is harsh because the reality is harsh.
So regional threats is just the polite diplomatic way of saying the place is a powder keg.
And Trump and Netanyahu are the two guys holding either the fire extinguishers or the matches. We just don't know which one they're going to use yet.
Wow. Fire extinguishers or matches?
Big moments in history turn on meetings just like this one. It can be the difference between a diplomatic breakthrough and a preemptive strike.
And given the Heritage Foundation connection, if their analyst is the one framing the story, I get the feeling that fire extinguisher might be filled with something flammable.
Or at least they believe you sometimes have to start a controlled burn to save the whole forest. The heritage view is typically that you have to confront a threat sooner rather than later. Kicking the can down the road is what created the problem in the first place.
So the big takeaway for 2026 is no more kicking the can.
The road is run out. There's nowhere left to kick it.
Okay, so as we finish, I want to leave you, our listener, with one final thought to chew on. We've talked about the nuclear piece and the regional piece, but what if we're looking at it all wrong?
Go on.
We assume nuclear talks means trying to stop a bomb. But what if, here in February 2026, the conversation has already shifted? What if the talk isn't about prevention anymore, but about management?
You mean managing a new reality?
Exactly. What if this meeting is about acknowledging that Iran is already a threshold nuclear state, and these regional threats are just the new normal?
Wow. That changes the entire chessboard. If prevention has failed, then you're not talking about diplomacy. You're talking about a new era of containment and deterrence, a new Cold War, but in the Middle East.
And if that's true, then this meeting isn't a crisis summit. It's the Yalta Conference for the 21st century. It's about redrawing the lines for a new, much more dangerous world.
That is a very heavy thought to end on.
Well, we don't really do light and fluffy here on the Deep Dive.
No, we certainly do not.
Keep your eyes on the headlines, and maybe more importantly, keep your eyes on who is interpreting those headlines for you. The lens matters just as much as the event itself.
Context is everything.
Thanks for listening. We'll be watching for any smoke signals coming out of that meeting.
Stay safe.